Hey everyone, I know we don't have a lot of time to go over the rest of Frankenstein, and I wanted to just wrap up a couple of ideas, but I don't really have the classroom time to give to it, so I thought I'd make this video very quickly just so we can get some of these last concepts out. The seminars today went about as I expect. It's always difficult beginning of the year and giving it a go for the first time in a formal seminar, but overall, we accomplished the task, and I think we're ready to try with To Kill a Mockingbird soon. A couple of quick wrap-ups. We did have the question that came up over and over again was why does the monster act the way he does? And is it his fault? Should we have pity on him? And really it comes down to what causes the monster to turn to revenge. And you do have to go back to Dr. Frankenstein's actions. Dr. Frankenstein rejects his own creation. He is reviled by it. And I like that one student pointed out that Dr. Frankenstein doesn't like himself very much. And then he when he sees what he has created, it's as if he's looking in his own mirror at what he created. And that was a neat image to talk about. So the way that the monster is rejected causes him to turn to revenge. Whether he should or shouldn't, we have to see through a regular moral lens. Does he have a legitimate reason to be upset? Yes, but we are looking for whether or not you guys believe that revenge is ever justified. And as a moral argument, I think if we were really talking about just the basics of it, we would say, no, it's not. That revenge is not something that we're supposed to take on as a human being. Most of us believe that revenge belongs to the higher power, that we leave it up to God or gods to do that. And that's why this story is so neat, because it ties to the modern, to what's called the modern Prometheus, which that's the secondary title to Frankenstein. Mary Shelley said, I'm rewriting the story of Prometheus. And if you know who he is, he's a Titan god. And he takes fire from the gods and he gives it to man because he loves man. He thinks man is a good creation, so he gives him fire so that he can have control over his environment. And it was done with a noble intention, but the punishment for Prometheus is to be tied to a rock and have his liver and his eyes eaten out by an eagle every day, and then it regenerates overnight, and then he has to go through that same pain the next day. Well, Dr. Frankenstein has to go through that same thing. He took what was dead and made it alive, which is not his role. Man is not supposed to be able to reanimate other men. That life and death lies in the creator, which is not Dr. Frankenstein, but he creates this monster and defies the laws of physics, and in doing so has broken the law, just like Prometheus did, and has to have a punishment. And Dr. Frankenstein's punishment is obviously losing all of these relatives over and over, that this cycle continues. But why? Why do we have to learn about that? What is the point of it? And I asked you all the question at the very end, which is, what does this have to do with our modern science endeavors? Now, I'm not talking about anything short term, although we all have a modern science adventure going on in our mind for what's going on with research with COVID and all the things that happen there. But even just keeping it on a basic level, the story of Prometheus and the story of Frankenstein is a moral question. Should we take matters of science into our own hands ethically? How far should that line be pushed? Should we use human cells to try to create other cells? Should we use animals in research? All of these things are basic questions that we have to ask. Is it something that we should do? The reason we have a frame story is because the frame isn't just to make it interesting. It has a purpose to the theme. And that theme having to do with Prometheus that we're talking about is whether or not man should take things into his own hands. Well, if you remember, Captain Walton says his ambition is to go to the North Pole, to be the man to go the farthest north, and it doesn't matter to him how many men it takes to get there. In other words, if men die in this endeavor, it will be worth it for science and for his own ambition to get there. And Dr. Frankenstein comes in as a cautionary tale to tell him this is where my ambition landed me, in hopes that Captain Walton gets the lesson of maybe we should be cautious when it comes to those things we want to accomplish. Because the overall question for Frankenstein and for Prometheus is, at what cost? We can do all kinds of great endeavors for science, but there always has to be an ethical question of at what cost will this particular road of science take? In other words, it was costly for Dr. Frankenstein to create his monster and have his monster kill off everybody he knew, when maybe he should have listened to those warning signs early on and not created the monster. Does that make sense? So there's a consequence to going beyond where science should have gone. And that ethical question, I think, is something that a student of science at a classical school especially should sit and think, at what cost is science being explored? Should we explore? Yes, but there are ethical dilemmas. And one of those that came up, without getting into anything specific in COVID, is about technology that allows us to splice genetics together from different species to know exactly what part of a species or a plant or a human causes what genetic trait. So what traits cause you to have arms? What traits to cause you to be able to see? We now have those maps to be able to know those things. And there's new technology that actually, we used to use an article when we were in 2019 about a process called CRISPR, which is gene splicing. And it has a lot of controversy to it because one of the first major stories about it was how a doctor used it to splice out a genetic defect from twin baby humans. And when he did that, he did not have permission from the scientific community to be doing human experiments. And that, how much could that have gone wrong? Trying to splice genes out of a human is still off limits ethically. So the classical student should be looking at science through the lens of, is this ethically something we should be doing? Just because we can, should we? Is a completely different issue of, well, certainly we can, right? There's all kinds of things we could experiment on, and we only have to look to our past to know that some of those experiments go very wrong. Definitely Dr. Mengele with World War II Germany was experimenting on people to see where pain tolerances were and chemical tolerances were with unwilling subjects, especially having to do with twins and elderly people. So there are lines of ethics that the classical science student should be considering. And so the lesson of Dr. Frankenstein is, at what cost? So I hope this is something interesting for you, and maybe you've enjoyed listening. And if you'd like to earn a bonus point, you can come and tell me, what does it mean when we ask the question, at what cost? Okay, hope you guys have a good night, and let me know if you have any questions.